Sam, good speaking to you again. Now, when we conducted our recent interview for TRBlock.com, I omitted to ask you a few questions regarding TFWA. Now, I know that you are one of a number of candidates who put their hats in the ring for the presidency, so I thought this might be good timing for you to address some of the questions that I have long held back on. Now, as we all know, TFWA has a 40-year-old history. The motto is by the trade, for the trade, a true brand association. Well, maybe. The first question I have to ask is whether you actually think the current structure is outdated, and whether it actually still conforms to the needs of the travel retail industry today. What needs changing in your view?
It's a very hefty question here, but let me answer like this. I think the TFWA structure has successfully supported the association for over 40 years. Well, one thing that is true, I guess, the industry is the evolution of the industry is so rapid and it's more dynamic than it has ever been over the last 20 years that I've been involved, I have to say. But I also have to admit that, and I think and I strongly believe that the foundation of the associations is really solid, not just financially, but also I believe because how it works, how the association works. That doesn't mean that we don't need to modernize certain aspects to ensure that we remain relevant. And relevance means visible, and of course, the events in Cannes and Singapore are extremely relevant to us, and they are our core activity. Now, I think we should look at the association a little bit from two angles. So first of all, I call this the brand and people mission. These are the platforms. It's all the workshop. It's the exhibitions. That's where we bring people together, where we allow the brands, because we're a brand association, we allow the brands to shine and show what they can do on a global perspective. On the other side, I think we need to make sure that the networking part works. So that's the people mission, the brand people mission. And I think with all the members in the back, so it's a 450 plus members that we have actively at the association. So we also need to create more value in the future. So this is the membership service mission. So where we need to build more content and make sure they get the money's worth out of the association.
Okay, now I know that you believe in the composition of the management committee, that the members provide valid and valuable contributions and perspectives across the industry. It's a very diverse group. But isn't it actually top heavy in terms of numbers?
Well, I can tell you it's really fun to be part of the group. But I think we should look at this from a different perspective. I think the fact that it's big and relatively big, I would say, but it's also extremely diverse. So we have members from eight different sectors of the business bringing all these various views. There's such a huge amount of experience and opinions from across the industry globally. Yeah, and that's all concentrated in one place. But of course, I think I know where you want to go, because a large group doesn't really help to in the decision making process, right? So, but in order to address that, so we always have these 5 specialized subcommittees at TFWA where all these members work, and that means in these subcommittees, so they discuss certain elements like in marketing, like in finance, like in corporate, and after that, they bring all these elements into the plenum, and the plenum is sort of working like a parliament, right? So so they bring all these businesses into the parliament. There's a debate. There's very often there's quite a hefty debate in certain elements. Then it's voted and it's done. So I think it takes a little bit more time to find consensus with a lot of people, but I think I'd rather spend 1 extra hour debating, but then come to a point where everybody agrees. But now here's the Swiss talking, so that's clearly my point there.
All right. Let's just move on. It seems to me, and certainly to others that matter, And I guess there's a degree of inevitability about this, that politics is increasingly involved in the election of members of the committee. But there are also shoo-ins where they arguably should not be allowed at all. What's your comment?
There for sure is politics, but I also believe that politics is a natural part of any election. And what must prevail is fairness, surely transparency, and of course, the more candidates there are, the more you find yourself in that political environment. Unfortunately, you might say, and I totally agree. But I say the benchmark should be a profile and the personality that a candidate brings to the table. For me personally, that's the most important criteria. What do I personally bring to the association? If this is about my CV, about my career, maybe a business opportunity, I don't think this is the right place, to be very honest, because I think the being at an association, generally speaking, is the willingness to serve a larger role, a bigger role.
It's the greater good.
And for the greater good. Thanks. Perfect English. So and I believe when that's not the case, very often politics is the bridge to the personal interests, which I hope that we can eliminate in the future more than we did in the past.
The articles of the association are actually quite restrictive, aren't they? I mean, it is an association, not a corporation. And that means that there cannot be a chief executive leading from the front, as it were. Instead, we generally get consensus by committee. Perhaps it's now time to review the covenants of the association to make it a more robust commercial entity. I mean, certainly it feels like that some of the time when it comes to dealing with TFWA and exhibition space, for example.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, by commercial, I guess refer to a business model that's focused primarily to more business type of operation, look top line and bottom line results, right? I think let's not forget one thing: the TFWA is, per definition, a non-profit organization, and the collaborative as a character of TFWA is defined, and you mentioned before, by a very simple, but I think a very efficient claim: by the trade for the trade. So, of course, there's room to adopt a more commercial mindset to stay relevant. I mentioned relevancy before, and of course, there's room to improve and to boost efficiency, and but we should always keep one goal on top of our head: is we need to create value for our members, and members is also understood. We need to create value for our industry. We should not forget that the TFWA is a non-profit organization, and TFWA's collaborative identity and mission has been defined very simply, but and you mentioned before, I think it's very efficient: by the trade for the trade. Of course, there's room to adopt a more commercial mindset, and there's also a lot of things that we can improve in terms of efficiency. The most important thing is that we stay relevant, rather than just transition into a corporate model. And I think you said it: we're an association, we're not a corporation. And I think very often this has been forgotten. So we do not lead from the front. And I believe that we always need to withhold the democratic value of the association very high. And also that's one reason that there's no chief executive leading TFWA like a corporation. And I much more rather refer that position, the position of the president, as a mediator in chief. So he's the kind of guy who needs to bring people together, who needs to focus on consensus. And if the consensus, when allows to build relevancy and sustainable relevancy, then I think TFWA's position as a corporation, as an association, is exactly achieved.
I think that the point I was trying to make is the fact that you're halfway there as a corporate entity because of the way that you manage the two principal income generators, which are the two shows, and that sometimes there is a reaction from the ground floor, as it were, in terms of the attitude of TFWA, the pricing, that actually lends itself to well, what choice do we have? We're either in it or we're not in it from the brands that participate in these exhibitions. It's an ongoing issue.
There's a discussion ongoing about. I totally agree. Uh, but again, I think we should not forget that the prices that we set for any of these exhibitions, as an example, um, are based by the exhibition space that we have to rent, and we just resell it basically, and then by the price that the brands would have to pay in order to exhibit their level of quality of a scan as they wish. Now the pricings again are voted by the management committee, so it's not these prices. Now, coming back on the commercial discussion before, it's the prices are not built primarily to maximize profit. So there, the prices are already a compromise in on what people pay, what we need in order to remain sustainable when it comes to the survival of the association. So the prices are not built for margin, I would say. They're built in order to keep the association going.
Well, there's certainly enough fat there because you managed to survive COVID without laying any people off. So that's good. That's important. It's important. Okay, I digress. Now, as an ancillary question regarding the presidency, there are many who do not consider it appropriate at all for any retailer to be president. I mean, this is a brand association, after all, and any president should, in this case, strictly speaking, come from a brand. With an incumbent retailer, there are arguably potential conflicts of interest. Certainly, that's the feeling. There is plenty of scope for them outside to get their two pennies worth in separate consultative conversations, I guess. I mean, do you agree with that?
I 100% agree here. And firstly, the president's role is to mediate, and it's also a unifying role. So a president represent the collective interests of its members and the association. And we know it's an association of brands. So I think a brand should represent other brands. I understand the concerns about potential conflict of interest, and still, I trust and I firmly believe that the voting members of the management committee will consider that in the actual vote. The key is impartiality and a commitment to serving the association as a whole. And I think no voting member should actually ever be in a situation where they have to consider whether they should or should not vote for a particular candidate because of a personal or a business reason.
Now, there are, of course, many aspects of the association that actually does real good, not linked to the exhibitions. For example, it's the charities that you support. The other associations themselves, whether financially or in training or in conference management. But as an association, TFWA really only has a strong European history and may lack visibility, something you touched on earlier, or tangible impact outside of Europe. I mean, do you think it should be more of a lobby association now, taking back some of the functions currently performed by DFWC and ETRC?
Well, I think the FWC and ETRC are, I would almost clear call partner associations, right? And I mean, TFWA's strong European history is undeniable, but the industry's global nature requires us to expand our influence beyond Europe, particularly in emerging markets like Asia, India, and of course also the Middle East. Today, TFWA's strength lies in bringing the entire industry together, I would think, and providing platforms for dialogue and collaboration. So the goal must be to enhance TFWA's visibility and values globally. I'm sure then we can complement lobbying efforts of these regional lobby group while focusing on what we do best. We do best is uniting the trade.
You touched on this earlier. I mean, how does TFWA cope with some of the seismic changes that have unfolded these past years? Not just the post-COVID recovery, but now, especially in the light of the slowdown of the Chinese economy and the patent lack of Chinese travelers. It's a very slow burn for them coming back.
Mm.
What do you think TFWA should be doing?
I can tell you the slowdown of the Chinese economy is probably one of the biggest challenge now, right? So I think the COVID, most of the countries or the majority of the countries have left COVID behind now. But the slowdown of China, some of our members feel that firsthand. So talk about the PNC category, and I've heard recent numbers of the alcohol business. It's not a birthday party at the moment for sure. I guess when we spoke about going global and represent TFWA's value to the world, I think we can help the industry by supporting members as they explore opportunities in new areas in emerging markets like India, Southeast Asia, and of course Middle East in certain parts. And that's one end of the story, right? The other side is we also need to make sure that we are capturing new demographics, so the younger travelers. And younger travelers, how do we address younger travelers with a different shopping behavior? So I think while the Chinese traveler is one specific demographic, one specific mentions that we see as a challenge today, I think we need to provide more data on how we can capture more business elsewhere. Will that be easy? Hell no, I don't think so, because I truly believe, and I see that for my own company, this is one of the biggest challenges that we face over the next couple of years.
Okay, so one last question. Just drawing the threads together of this conversation. There are three things that you wanted to really move the organization, the association forward with. What would they be? Three things that could happen in the next 12 months.
And I think it's all about people, culture, and service. So these are the three things that we should consider first. Now, I don't think that the association needs a revolution. What it needs is a constant evolution. So we mentioned the word unity and consensus many times today. So we are not strong if we're divided, right? We can only act if we act together and if we do not engage in politics. So for me, mission number one is I would name it unity and dialogue. Which good news is this mission wouldn't actually cost a lot, right? So it's more a collective effort that accepts transparency and true democratic values. And even if sometimes means that things are not as fast as we wish them to be. Again, Swiss talk, we need to talk more, as simple as that. I think mission number two is the brand and people mission. I mentioned that before. I think we need to concentrate on and even short terms, because the Singapore show coming up, it's not an easy sell. It's not a secret. It will challenge. It is challenged by the Chinese slowdown, as we understand. So, but we have to make sure that we keep our main events successful and relevant and sustainable. Again, so but there's almost a short-term business aspect that we need to work on. So this is the brand and people mission. Then I think mission number three, from my point of view, is the membership services. We need to create more tools, more data. And with tools, I also mean that we need to figure out how we publish those things and what sort of information do we publish. And don't get me wrong, I think we do a lot. Is it enough? Hard to say, but I believe there should be maybe more specific information on certain subjects that we identify. Thought, for instance, about AI shopping now impacting the retail world, younger demographics entering the traveler market. There's plenty of subjects that are also plenty of opportunities for our members.
Well, Sam, whether you or any of the other candidates get the presidency, I hope they take out some of this conversation and go forward with what you believe. I think there are certain perils to the presidency that I wouldn't envy anyone. So wish you well and good to see you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Peter. Appreciate it.